where if the data is correctly structured, we can do whatever we need to do with it, and we can package it and pass it on and make it available to the right bodies. Anyway, I'll leave that for now.
Absolutely. And yeah, obviously I totally agree with you. I don't think we're quite as far down the track as you're talking about, but I think that's certainly a direction we want to go in. And let's talk more once George has done the intro and you see where we've got to along that path already. So just briefly, for I think a number of the people who have been in the last couple of meetings, but there are a lot of new people on board today as well. Plus, a lot of the fundamentals of what we're looking at over the last 3 days are the same for healthcare, residential, and education. But there are obviously subtle differences. I mean, I think you'll see from what George is going to show, particularly today, healthcare has its own very particular challenges. George, are you ready to take that away?
I am. Yeah. So let's share my screen. Okay. Now, all of these sessions, we had an education one on Monday, a residential one yesterday, and obviously we've got the healthcare one today. The principle that we're trying to work on here is all around the golden thread. So to be able to define what the golden thread is and what activities we need to carry out to deliver that, but importantly, then look at that from a point of view of what the benefits are. So what we've got within the sort of community, we've obviously got a lot of software companies that are willing to collaborate with us. But one of the big challenges that we've found over the last few months is that we've discovered that there's really very little confidence that the information that's being handed over is fit for purpose. So in this particular event, only 8% of the people felt that they'd received complete Regulation 38 information, which is really damning because that is a legal requirement. And I mean, to be frank, if you're not being provided that information, then somebody's breaking the law. What we need to do as a community is raise people's awareness of that so that we can start to get that quality of information being handed over. So that's an output from the golden thread. Similarly, people aren't confident of the O&M information, or even that the current fire and emergency file information is accurate. But the most damning thing, I think, is that there's not a recognition, it appears, at senior management of their liabilities on this. So as the regulator becomes more active, which they certainly seem to be becoming more active at the moment, we're going to see more prosecutions, more fines, certainly more delays, if people haven't carried out their things properly. So part of the role of the Golden Thread Task Force is to understand that and then help us communicate that to others. Because in many cases, the people that are on this call are aware of what needs to be done. The trouble is senior management and maybe senior directors aren't aware. And they think that they've outsourced the risk of this, and that they can no longer do that. If we look at what the golden thread actually means, it's electronic. It runs right the way through, so it's not in silos, and it needs to be easily transferred when there's a change of ownership. So what we've tried to do is look at that from a practical perspective, rather than simply saying you've got to do it because if you don't, you're not compliant. It's actually saying what does it actually do for the organization. So if, for example, you're an asset management team, if you can more clearly understand what's been installed and how it's been installed, then your risk is reduced. So what we're trying to do with the task force is identify why information is needed, who's gathering it, who benefits from it, and what the tangible potential savings are. And the golden thread needs to run through a whole range of different activities, but it is the DNA that's tying everything together, so that we're able to look from even if it's maybe a refurbishment, you've got the planning, the creation, and the operation, and you're tying together that common thread of information through that process. So that's what we're trying to do for education, for residential, for healthcare, and any other type of facility. So in the healthcare group, this group here, we've got a really great group of people that have signed up to contribute to that. And so not everybody can attend today. We've set up 2 more meetings, one later in the month on the 18th and another at the beginning of March. And the new hospital program is actually, they've asked to be able to attend on the 4th of March. So we've got engagement at a really senior NHS level for what we're doing. So and part of the big challenge, I was talking with one of the big SPV managers and saying, right, what is critical to you? Well, first of all, he said, we really need to know who owns what now. Yeah. But with handback coming along, who will own it? So the differentiation between responsibility is critical. Obviously, we need to know where it is. We need to know what it's connected to. And also, from a point of view of as-built information, have we got the as-built information that we truly need? And the practice is probably not. So what we've tried to do is look at this from a point of view of what's the purpose of this. We've got statutory information, which is there's some overlap then with operational information. So in other words, the statutory information, statutory inspections and the like, and works, that needs to be complemented by what is operationally critical to keep the facility operating. And this is relatively generic across the different types of buildings that we're working with. But the other consideration is organizational. So how is the facility actually being used by end users? And what's common to all of those are spaces and assets. So if we look at the golden thread, all of the things that we're trying to do, but if we can concentrate and make sure that the spaces and the assets are captured, then that's a core area. So then we've got fire safety, energy, and also infrastructure. So people running new IT systems, for example, and making sure that we also, all of those different drivers also relate to spaces and assets. You'll see a theme beginning to come here. So we've got building services. We've also got a different community of people that are managing things, building BMS systems and smart systems. And also, as far as equipment's concerned, in a healthcare environment, you've got clinical equipment. Now, all of those tend to be different silos, but what they're all consistent around is spaces and assets. So therefore, all of them should be using the same geography and the same base asset information. Now, there's going to be some people who are already familiar with the way healthcare facilities work, but we've got a lot of experience of working in this area. I've been doing it now for probably 25 years, and I know Kevin Phippen, for example, who's I can see there, Kevin, you've been very much in the in this area as well. But a lot of people don't really fully understand what a hospital is. They understand that they go there for treatment, but the complexity of how a hospital runs is quite significant. And it's not just hospitals. So you've got service lines, which are basically the clinical services that are being delivered. You've then got care settings, as that's the term for making sure that you've got the right type of space for performing a particular function. And the other measure on that is availability. So do we have the right available care settings to carry out the service? Again, spaces and assets. And again, just to look at the whole overall healthcare facility, we've got CEFS on here, James Doubtfire, who was showing me yesterday some of the stuff that he's been doing. And that's they're around. I'll be asking James to explain that in a bit. But it's not a hospital, but it's an ancillary service for doing cleaning of all the equipment that's being used. So you've got a primary care area, you've got secondary care and tertiary care, but again, spaces and assets become common to that. And then finishing off now, you've got step-up care, which is when you maybe have to go into an acute hospital, maybe for some treatment. Then when you've been treated, you need somewhere to be able to go to afterwards to make sure that the acute hospital doesn't get blocked up. And community services, and again, spaces and assets are common to that. So you can see that what we've got with the golden thread is something that's pretty sophisticated from that perspective. And finally, certainly in the UK, we've got the NHS, we've got social care, and there's an overlap there. That's all being, people have been trying for years to bring those together into integrated care systems. And then you've got private. And again, you've got spaces and assets that are there to support things. And then you've got an NHS trust, you've got special purpose vehicles, and you've got FM contractors. So coming back to what I was saying right at the beginning, who's responsible for the equipment that's in there? Who's responsible for the systems? And how can we make it so that that is all sort of joined up? I was told yesterday of a situation where an air handling unit, this has just happened yesterday, an air handling unit was taken out of commission because somebody was fixing a motor or changing a belt, and they didn't realize that it was actually impacting on the operating theatre. So it actually took out the operating theatre. They're still working out what the penalties are likely to be on that. But in this example, this is what Sodexo do. They've got the whole of the operating theatre then as a spatial model. But importantly, they've tied back which air handling unit is supporting which spaces. Now, why is that important? Well, for the example that happened yesterday, had the person that was carrying out the work realised that that particular air handling unit was supplying the environment to the operating theatre, then that would have made a big difference. Now, an operating theatre, I think the penalties on an operating theatre being out is something like £5,000 a day. So the impact of that was huge, and probably it was very disruptive for the people that were being operated on, and all the fallback. So the relationships there, I think, are really quite important. So what we want to try and do is come up with, I think, some work items from this, just as Richard was saying earlier, some tasks that can come out of this, where we can look collaboratively at how we can bring these things together. Richard, I was going to go on and just explain about the room data sheets and things like that.
Yeah.
Is that worth me just doing?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's worth. Yeah, I would say yes, and then we can get onto the sort of like the collaboration after that. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a key document that is used in healthcare called a room data sheet. And what it's there to do is to both provide the brief for a design, but also it's the contractual document that people need to work to say what the lighting, acoustics, the ventilation, the heating responsibilities are for a particular space. So that's the way it's articulated. So in many cases, people are just looking at room data sheets as documents that go in an O&M. What is really important to do is to make sure that the information that goes into those documents is machine readable. And that's where the golden thread comes in. So just an example of that here, we've got a spatial model with the room and also the room data sheet in there. So the document is there, and the document holds the information about what that space is supposed to do in terms of information. But they can also extract that information as asset data and then check it against 360 photographs. So the 360 photographs actually have been tagged so that you can assign responsibilities for each of those assets. So it's very clear what's in that room, who's responsible for it, and has it changed since last year, for example. And if any new work is carried out, you can just take another 360 photo and update it. And for those that aren't aware of what a room data sheet is, it starts off by determining the type of room that it is, and also what the activities are that room is designed to support. That's really quite important. But then there's details on here about what type of door width it needs to be. So for access perspectives, you'll see here, it says here, refer to fire strategy, which is one of the other things that we want to be, we've got another work stream looking at that, but being able to produce a new fire strategy for an existing building becomes really important. And I think probably people on the call can give us some examples of why that's important. We've got here...
The thing about functional space is actually not something we've really been looking at, is it?
No.
Hitherto. But it's obviously particularly, well, and in anything, I suppose it is, but particularly in hospitals, because you've got an office that could be the office of, I don't know, the consultant, but 2 hours of the day he's out doing his rounds, and one of the nurses is using it to do the staff schedules or something.
That's exactly right, Richard. I mean, what I was talking to somebody yesterday, and the typical utilization of their healthcare facility, a lot of the spaces is 24%.
Oh my God.
So that's quite shocking, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
And what
Yeah.
is happening is people are building new buildings, they're building new capacity, when actually utilizing what they've got is a very low cost way of increasing capacity, which then could create more treatments, etc. So it's a complex relationship between the space, the activity, the services. You know, do you have enough clinicians to be able to carry out that work? So there's a whole range of different jigsaw pieces that need to be drawn together. And the reason I'm raising it is I think this healthcare group is probably best placed to really demonstrate how better information can really make a difference. It could transform the way we're delivering healthcare and the cost of healthcare, because if it's a bit more joined up. But the reason, I hope I wasn't boring people with talking about the complexity of the process going forward. But Kevin, for example, has worked in a PFI hospital environment for the last few years, and he can perhaps speak to, Kevin, can you, the challenges with the politics and who's responsible for what? Could I
Yeah, very
you
much so,
to-
George. I think the other thing I'd say, just on the point of view of room data sheets, is understanding how they fit in the context of PFI hospitals in particular. So the way that PFI is structured is that the SPV gets a monthly fee for carrying out all of its duties, but that monthly fee is made up as a composition of all of the room data sheets. So the room data sheets set out the functional requirements for each space, and the FM contractor is obliged to keep that space at those functional levels in terms of heating, cooling, lighting, etc., etc. And all of those elements go together to make up the rental effectively that the NHS pays for that space. So the room data sheet is actually very important under PFI, as well as it is under the golden thread and all the other technical aspects. And it is quite difficult, going back to your earlier presentation with the slides and the various parties. I think, that there are also other interfaces where a lot of the medical equipment in those spaces may well sit outside of the FM contractor and may well still be maintained by the trust itself. And the point you made about handing over information and to who, I think is also important. That it's difficult sometimes that the person you're handing it to isn't necessarily one organization. It can be several organizations who each want information for their own particular purposes. So it's quite a difficult process in terms of understanding who the stakeholders are and what their particular interests are.
Thank you. Yeah, Matt Wilkie, who can't be on this call today, but he will be on the next one. Matt's like Kevin; he's very experienced of running healthcare facilities, and he works for IML, which is Infrastructure Management Limited. They're part of Barclays Bank, so they are the funders for a lot of these projects, and so he looks at things across dozens or hundreds of healthcare facilities. And one of the things that he said is a very common problem is who's responsible for the hand dryers? Yeah, because the hand dryers have probably been installed by the trust. And then everybody turns around and says to the FM, the hand dryers aren't working. And it's not their responsibility. And when there's life cycling being done, who's responsible for paying for the new hand dryers?
Yeah, I think also, George, an example I always give, because the model you showed of Manchester is one that I was involved in setting up. And the example I would always give to the SPV in terms of asset management and responsibility is that within that building, things like chairs and tables, that they're fairly nondescript and there are lots of them and they're all pretty much the same. But within that complete complex, there are 42 million pounds worth of chairs.
Yeah.
All of which the SPV is responsible for. So at the point of handback, if those chairs don't add up to 42 million, the SPV will be expected to, fulfill the shortfall, whatever that might be. So, going back to 360 photographs and asset tagging, whilst it may be contentious sometimes in terms of people saying, well, that's not really a maintainable item, it is actually, a critical item within a PFI contract, because the value is such, and the responsibility to replace that item if it's missing sits with the SPV and then often to the FM provider. So it's very important to make sure that you can keep on top of all that and at least have an understanding of whether it's roughly the same number as you started out with, because it can easily change over the course of a 30-year contract, and suddenly you realize that you're millions of pounds in the hole, as it were.
Excellent. So if anybody is interested particularly in knowing a little bit more about room data sheets and how they are part of this process, if you put RDS in the chat, I think that would be a good thing to do. Because, for example, people think that the room data sheets have, are the assets for that particular the building. But in fact, because it's a briefing tool, you'll see the type of assets that are in there, which you've got, and also the group. See the thing there that says group? That's assigning who supplies it and who's responsible for it. So if it's a group 1, that means it's part of the construction and part of the main area, whereas the group 4 items, I think, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the group 4 that would be provided by the trust. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it depends which hospital and which PFI contract you're looking at, but typically group 1 is provided by and maintained by the SPV, as would group 2 and group 3, and then group 4 would be provided and maintained by the trust directly. And the fact that those things can change from room to room, from building to building, and I would say that often the trust are not aware of exactly which bits they look after and which bits the SPV look after, that often you find clinicians will change the use of a room to deal with particular medical issues. So if there's a thing like COVID, which we obviously recently had, suddenly rooms that were designed for one purpose are being repurposed for something completely different. And that means that, from a clinical perspective, you're just saying, well, I don't need all these chairs in it, just chuck them out. So there's a lot of ad hoc sort of clinical activity that might change the function of a room. And unless you're on top of all of those rooms and spaces, it's very difficult to understand, how your liabilities might be changing or how your asset management requirements might be changing.
And with flu outbreaks potentially every year, that's quite frequent, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that they're the kind of biggies, aren't they, that we all see and are aware of. But there are also lots of local medical NHS things that change. There might be an emphasis on, I don't know, heart disease or certain types of treatment, and there's a publicity campaign about it. So then lots of people attend a hospital to get examined, and that means that the use of a room might change for that purpose. It's not. I think it lends itself to the whole purpose of Golden Thread, really, that all of the systems that support this data need to be a lot more dynamic, a lot more linked, a lot more operating in real time, so that it's not all human in the loop stuff. It's not all people going around and checking stuff and then 3 months later writing it up and changing it. It has to be much more dynamic, much more happening in real time. And I think that's why it's important that systems and the whole CDE becomes a real time thing that can make those changes in itself, rather than having someone to interact with.
So for the next meeting, which is on the 18th of February, same time, 11 o'clock, if you know of something that is gluing these things together, if you've got practical experience of them, if you could let us know beforehand, because it may well be that we want to illustrate some of that, show some of that, particularly if it's a matter of maybe 2 or 3 different systems that are working together, because that's really what we want to try and go for on that. Richard, I think now we could go back to the golden thread work, the benefits side of
The
things.
tasks.
Yeah, should I
You
share
want to
my
put this?
screen? And you
Yeah,
can
if you
talk
put that
through?
up and we can look at that. So this is something we started in a little bit more detail yesterday, which is looking at the benefits that we want, the goals that we want to achieve. How do we actually do that in terms of tasks, and whose responsibility is it to actually do the tasks?
So what I've done, Richard, in line with our conversations yesterday,
Yeah,
we've started with the financial benefits, so that we can actually identify, maybe to senior management, why we actually want information that is standardized and auditable, and what the financial benefit of that is. And the same with these are all benefits of the golden thread. So here we've got the benefits of cost and risk reduction across the life cycle, and we've got some estimates there as to what the impact of that is. And then being able to bring together supply chains so people are more glued up. So again, these are things that are carrying out through the whole process. So what we've then done is looked at them, breaking those down into more, there's financial benefits there. We've then got strategic benefits, which are looking at things in a bit more detail. So again, these are the activities, or sorry, these are the outcomes. These are the outcomes of that type of coordination, again, across those 6 areas. And I'll then pass you on here, Richard. This is where we're...
yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, so basically we're kind of going on this backwards. The first slide George just showed was about, that's the end game. That's where we get to. That's the business organization that we're talking to wants to achieve. The second one was about sort of like, okay, so at a broad level, how do we get there? And strategically, what are the benefits? This is about in terms of operations. So what are the operational benefits within the areas, and how do we get those operational benefits? For example, within having greater stakeholder involvement, greater stakeholder coordination, we'd expect benefits in reduced costs, risk, design and supply chains, getting better information, etc. But how do we get to that? And that's about tasks. It's about doing things. Now you can see there, this is just a few that we had in quickly over a couple of minutes yesterday. This is about stakeholder involvement, and it was an architect who put those together. But we want that and more for each of those. I think there are 9, aren't there, George?
Yeah.
Activity areas, and that's where we want you to help. Not to do the whole thing, but if there's an area, do you want to go back to the front one? Scroll right, George.
Yeah.
That's it, just so I can, yeah. I mean, if your field would be producing data and O&M, producing an O&M, just input into that one. It's fine. Whatever you've got experience in. If you've got experience in digital twins, you've got experience in maintenance, look at that section and tell us what tasks need to be done to get us the benefits in the benefits column, relevant benefits.
So one of our other group members is Malta. So Mo from Malta was on the call on Monday, and what he's done is set up an online version of this, which isn't constrained by Excel. And the benefit of doing this with Mortar is that's used quite extensively by quite a few contractors to do task information delivery plans. So in other words, to say what needs to be done by whom and when. So that's something that we've created a version of this. I can't show you that because I don't know my way around it too well yet, because he only set it up on Monday. But we'll involve Mo in this. But the important thing is that we're not just doing this in spreadsheets. We're actually providing a platform to do it.
Absolutely. Pierre, before you ask me a question, Pierre, can I ask you a question? So does what I've just said there, what George were explaining about the task, does that cover an amount of what you've been saying?
Certainly. I think the part behind this is the contribution from the different parties, because we all come from different backgrounds and different interests.
Yeah.
Now, I have a cap in just about every single one of these, and I'll say I'm the generalist rather than the specialist. But the really important part for me is what I will call that proof of concept, and the idea that I've got the little book with all the guidelines in it. What that book is to make a far more consistent approach. Have we considered? Have we considered? Have we considered? And I use the term form where it's not branded, but it's actually the data that is in there. And this ties in with what Mo's doing, is what I will call the URL, the link to what that form looks like. And that is far more intuitive to everybody, because the data starts, you understand where the dots are connecting up.
Yeah.
And so that's my thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else got any comments on anything so far? How do you feel about the methodology that we're talking about doing? Do you think that covers it, or do you think we need to do more? Franco.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that what Pierre has said, I am 150% in agreement with him. And I wanted to add something to what I said yesterday. And I'm looking at methods of capturing these contributions in the most effective manner. And I called George before this meeting. I'm putting together some ideas and recommendations that are not yet ready because, I'm working on it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think that what is being discussed, not only in this meeting, but also in other meetings, should be utilized in the smartest possible way, right? But I just wanted to say that what Pierre said is very much in line with what I think.
Excellent. No, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Are
George,
there any
any
contractors? Yeah, I was
Good.
just going to ask if there's any contractors on the call that could contribute. Have we got any contractors?
We got any contractors that couldn't contribute?
Okay. Yeah, it's
That's probably a yes, but we're shy.
Are there any designers and delivery people? I mean, come on, this is supposed to be a working group. We need to engage.
Yeah, we need input.
Can I just comment a few things, George? You mentioned earlier the fact that assets and locations are kind of constant throughout the piece. I've been doing quite a bit lately on, again, schemes or schemas for the way that CAFM systems, CMMS systems are set up, and also understanding the hierarchies between locations and assets. I don't think it's very clearly understood by those that often set the systems up. And I think as a consequence of that, it becomes much more difficult to plug data into them. And then you've got the other impact of people having their own particular legacy systems, which each have different pluggable requirements.
Yep.
So I think that the way that systems, independent of their manufacturers or their designers, are set up largely dictates how effective the golden thread can be. And the schema is very important to that. I favour treating locations as assets because I think it reduces the maintenance cost and it makes the whole thing much simpler. So if I'm maintaining something, I'm maintaining the building, and I have a maintenance plan for the whole building, and that will include the air handling systems, the heating systems, etc., fire systems in that building. Then I know that that building is compliant when I've completed that maintenance service delivery. Whereas quite a few of the systems are set up based upon particular generic asset types, such as heating, lighting. So you might have half the lighting in one building, half the lighting in another building done. It doesn't lend itself well to the way that the golden thread sees itself, as it were, in the future. So I think the way that CAFM systems are set up, the way that data is managed, and largely the problems are coming from the older interrelational database type systems that were originally built back in the 80s, that are just basically large spreadsheets. Things like Maximo and SAP are primarily large spreadsheets with little macros between them, but lots of providers are heavily invested in them, and that means that you're having to kind of translate everything to fit the way that they work, and it doesn't really lend itself to the way that the golden thread and the way that CDE should operate. So I'm more than happy to have an input on that, on schemas and on the way that things should be structured.
Absolutely. I mean, just to answer that, or just to make an observation on that, I think one of the biggest challenges is people think that asset management is a fixed thing after the handover, and actually, in particular in hospitals or healthcare facilities, it's absolutely not. There's stuff changing all the time. Yeah. And therefore, you then need to be able to look at each of the information sets in different ways according to purpose. So, for example, what a lot of people think is that the CAFM system is the main maintenance system. But in many cases, it's just being used for doing planned and preventative work instructions. It's not often being used to do reactive calls. It can be, but
you're absolutely right, George. And that's one of the things when I talked about legacy systems and very big interrelational database systems, that in reality, they're not being used to anything like their entirety. They're just being used as simple planners for maintenance.
Yes.
The things they're typically used for, the things you could do much easier with a spreadsheet. Yeah. And you're paying for a Rolls Royce, but you're only using one of the wheels of that Rolls Royce to drive your business. Yeah. And that's where I think, again, it then makes it very complicated to link all the other stuff, the BMS stuff into it, the spatial stuff, the active plan stuff into it. So it's about thinning down the data and making it more relevant. And once you've got it down to the relevant data, then you can link it all together and automate it much more easily. And that's where the schema comes in. It has to be a semantic schema that covers spaces, assets, and things. Yeah. And I'm used to coming from a manufacturing environment prior to getting into healthcare. I want to sit at a screen first thing in the morning and understand how that business is running. And that's often possible within manufacturing because all the systems are linked together. You can just press a button and say, right, how's that particular production line been performing in the last 24 hours? And then if there's a problem, drill down until you get to the root of the problem and then solve it. The quality of data in the NHS isn't that good, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the way the information is presented for you as the asset manager, and in fact, actually, within Sodexo, you've got lots of different people that we're doing different things, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that applies again to the NHS. That because there are different hospitals being run by different SPVs and different FM contractors under PFI, people are doing things in their own particular way. And over the course of a 25 to 30 year PFI contract, there's been a large deviation from the way it started. So I don't think anybody's quite clear on exactly how people are maintaining assets and what differences there are across the whole of the UK Gov estate.
Okay, let me, Pierre.
Thank you. So very quickly on this, and Kevin, same story about the data structure. If you go back, and apologies being a Revit user, but if you're modeling, the rooms or spaces are containers, and the containers hold everything that you need. And it's the smallest granular way of actually being able to, one, you've got to manage security, access, the services. Everything is nicely controlled and can be reported through the data structure. So coordination is one thing. The other part is it's a collection and makes it easy to link. And one of the things is that the visual cues that come from that is very easy. Just show me all of these things in the building that are spaces that are performing or not performing. In other words, the wrapper around that, how they're presented, is really easy to do when the data is correct, because it can be then visually shown what's happening. So it really is important, I think, for some of these practical parts of when I say a document, a URL to the document, is also the container is actually going to report where all the things are. And this goes back into not the CAFM system, but when I worked on malls in the Middle East, is that's the container that is the tenancy, the adjacent tenancy. What happens when you aggregate 3 tenancies into one? How do you manage it? So there's a set of rules that you need to sort out beforehand, but it actually gives you a very, very tight control with that.
I think on that, Pierre, I mean, that's exactly the point I was trying to make about schemes, that the container is a very good way of describing the building, that the container should contain everything from an asset perspective that's in that building. Unfortunately, because a lot of the FM companies come from, providing FM services in a variety of different sectors, they would structure their CAFM system around generic groups of equipment, such as HVAC equipment, plumbing equipment, pumps, etc., etc. So they've got things that are outside of the box. Literally, if the container is a box, they set it up so it's outside of it. So it doesn't work when you're trying to link data from Revit, data, IFC, Kobe type data, because that's all structured around containers. And that's the way it needs to be structured within all of the systems for them to start to interface together.
I think the point that you're making there, Kevin, is important from a relationship perspective as well, because what we tend to do is, from a design perspective, you will design in systems, then it goes into construction, it's broken into work packages. So therefore, all the O&M information is often being delivered in a work package format, which is breaks it down from a system perspective. And then the asset management team, to a great extent, they try and transform it back into systems, which is crazy, really. Now, that's not to say that the designers who are using Revit, for example, that's not to say they should be putting things into systems. I mean, arguably they should if that's appropriate. I know technically they can, but in many cases that's not the way models are put together, because you're often federating models that have been produced by half a dozen different people. But the key thing about that is classification and taxonomy, so that the information can be presented in different ways. And we also need to recognize that we've got asset information and we've got product information. So the product information is now increasingly being recorded in using things like GS1, which is a standardized way, a barcoding system of being able to identify a particular manufacturer's product. But that's different than the standardized asset types. So therefore,
I want to get
sorry.
I want to get back to where what we're actually doing, which is the tasks, and looking at the tasks and our process moving forward. The bigger picture we can leave for another day or another meeting, but let's focus on this for the last 10 minutes. Tom.
My question was on the sort of bigger picture, so I'll hold on for now, Richard, if you're focusing on this.
Okay, Franco.
Sorry.
You're on mute, Franco.
Yeah. Very, very short addition to what has just been said. First of all, I wanted to agree again with Pierre about the concept of container assets. At the same time, I would like to add that also the container is obviously an asset. The second observation is about what George has just said, which is the way the information evolves during the asset life cycle. And I wanted to focus what I'm saying to one step, which George knows I am very passionate about, and that is testing and commissioning. When you shift from assembling bits and pieces and you enter the testing and commissioning stage, in the testing and commissioning stage, the core element is the system, right? You test systems. So I just wanted to add this because during this last or almost last stage of the asset life cycle, you have to reassemble the information in such a way that the system is at the core of the attention.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. That was all.
Excellent. Okay, so where are we? I think we understand what we need to do, which is to get tasks behind the benefits on the spreadsheet that we've got, which we'll be doing via Mortar, which will make it, which is a lot more user friendly than typical Excel. The plan is to get this input from you over the next week or so that when we get to the next meeting on the 18th, we can actually go through that, treat it as a round table, and we'll go through these tasks and chew them up, and you'll have this the semi-final draft of this spreadsheet via Mortar before the next meeting, so that at the next meeting we can validate the document and the process, and also argue or discuss any variations.
Richard,
George?
should we? I was just going to say, I'm happy to send this spreadsheet out now so that people have got something.
You've got to start,
that
that's
they
a good
can
idea.
look at, and then
yeah, good one. James?
Yeah, sorry. So I was going to say that because I know you asked for people to put their hands up for nominating if they wanted to do a task, and I noticed that I was one of the ones being quiet as well. So yeah, please do send the spreadsheet, because I'd look through them. I mean, it does. Again, we're kind of circling it slightly because if the task or use case, as we like to use, is it around the resilience of the space? Is this what we're focusing on as a overall objective? Because I know the call sort of segued a little bit in a couple of different directions, but it started with space being ultimately underutilized. So is it about its resilience? Is this what the focus of this is?
So there's two elements. The way I would look at it, James, is there's two elements to this. One is looking at things from a golden thread perspective. For example, you'd probably to look at the context of what you've just said there, is understanding from each stakeholder what space they need, why they need it, and what is required in terms of information to be able to satisfy that, so that you're not using the space inappropriately. So you also probably want to have a record of the room data sheets and in other words, what it was contractually. So that falls into the O&M production, I guess. Yeah. And also down here, you're into the digital twin. So there's a range of different activities which actually deliver the outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just trying to get my head around the clarity of the outcome. So if it's golden threads, you're wanting a baseline of information to understand how space can be used
And
with the risk of sounding with bad English being used better.
Well, it's not just about functionality, no.
It's the resilience then, in terms of can we change it? Can we change it from one use to another if it's being underutilized?
The point that you've made is a good one, and that is that the use case is really important, and there are going to be many different use cases. So if you can think of a use case that you want to pursue with this golden thread joined up stuff, then we can then say, right, how do we actually get to that point? Do we what tasks would you do, James, on your projects to actually be able to achieve that particular outcome? But there will be other outcomes as well. And it might be operational resilience. It might be quality. It might be fire. I mean, Colin Newman's on here. Colin, you're involved in fire, I think, aren't you?
Just a tad, yeah.
Yeah. So you will have a perspective on this that is going to be probably different to, maybe James or, one of the other team members. So your experience of what is important to you, what tasks would you say need to be done by specifiers, by the designers to make your job easier? Does that make sense?
It certainly does.
Yeah, I think it does. If I can put, if it's an apply and if I use the word bias, my particular bias to it, then yes, I think that will make it a lot more digestible for people as well. Like we've run around this a lot in terms of data. What data do you want? What data do you need? And I think if we ever say what data do we want, we always default to, well, I'll have all of it, which, is that fit for purpose is probably another argument.
Absolutely. Pierre.
Very quickly, it's about the different roles under that RACI. Every single one of these things about the containers, the components, the assemblies, everything, each of those role players has a different set of requirements. So James, it's the kind of thing where as the architect, I require this, as the asset manager, you require that. And that's what we need to put in under the responsible is which are the roles and what are their specific focuses on that information that's available. But it's important, in my opinion, that we retain the ownership. That's the really important one. Who owns that data? And that must be absolutely front and center because everybody else then benefits from that ownership. There's one place and everybody benefits. Thank you.
Okay, so George, you're going to send, JISC will send out this document, this spreadsheet, certainly, to everyone, including some people who weren't able to make it but are interested in this. And hopefully you can all contribute to that and get it back to us, as I say, within the next week or so that we can put it all together and for the next meeting when we can get some sort of final output.
I think what would be helpful as well, Richard, is if people could let us know whether you think that what we're doing here is useful. Because obviously people have put aside an hour of their time and probably a little bit more. We've got a couple more meetings coming up. And I'd really just like to see if people think that this is something that's useful from their perspective. Can you put your hands up or whatever if you do? Brilliant. Okay, well, that's encouraging.
Okay, so I think we've got a plan. So we will get back to you. Hopefully this afternoon we'll get this out to you, so watch out for it. And we will see you all again, hopefully in 2 weeks' time.
And the likelihood is what we'll also do is probably on a one-to-one basis, we'll reach out and have some individual conversations, because what we'd also like you to do is spread the word. So if there's other people that may be interested in this, people that you're dealing with, then if we could bring those in. I mean, Gordon, have you got any healthcare facilities that you're working in?
Well, the author of the new SIBS Healthcare Engineering and Estates Management Guide, there's a new guide that's coming out imminently. Now, it's been coming out for about a year. But all the HTM certification and all the rest of it, there's one of the SIBS patrons that I know very well, so he'd certainly put you in touch with him effectively. So to see that that's aligned with that process.
I think you were saying, I'm sorry to go on, but you were saying that district heating systems, which is part of what you're involved with, that would district heating systems be relevant to healthcare facilities?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said in one of the other presentations earlier on in the week, George, whether it's a district heating system or a communal heating system, a heating system's a heating system. They just get bigger in size, that's all. You know, the same efficiency of those systems is imperative for the operation of that asset, whether it be a cooling system, a heating system. The big race, or if heat networks are going to provide a carbon reduction footprint for the United Kingdom's heating and cooling processes, we need to unify the big heat generators so that they're next door to the heat consumers and tie them together. Now, that's a bit of a macroeconomic and macro engineering design issue, but there's got to be conversations out with just leaving it to the residential builders to adopt what they're going to do. Yeah, exactly. Data centers at the moment just expel heat because they use air cooling and just expel heat. Now you're looking at water evaporative cooling of the racks, but they've got all this heat that's in the fluid. Well, here's an idea. Heat the homes that are next door, or wherever they can use that heat. The problem is a big data centre's not next door where everybody wants to live, but that's what's happening. It is happening in pockets and it's expanding out. But yeah, absolutely. So all these conversations are ensuing, whilst the new Internet of Things that are generating data that can evidentially tell you when a unit's going to fail, or predictive failure of a component, or not, as the case may be. Here's a good idea. If the machine is telling you everything's working in harmony, leave the flipping thing alone. Stop tampering with it. That actually automatically puts it out of kilter. You wouldn't give your car to a washing machine engineer. You take it to the specific engineer and resolves it. But if something goes out of kilter, you need to know about it and then have a discussion with the individual that may have done that or whatever. But it's not about browbeating or anything like that. It's just making sure the asset operates for the maximum benefits.
I know of a hospital where they run the heating all year round, even in the summer, because it's a steam-based system, and it actually takes probably a day or 2 days for the heat to get to the radiators, and they're worried about switching it off, because if they switch it off, it might not come back on again. Now that particular organisation, they've just gone through an upgrading exercise to use heat pumps, and they've discovered too late that the heat pumps aren't giving them the temperatures that they actually need. So it just shows what you're saying there. I think is very opposite.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was said earlier on about data, and I think it's been mentioned by some of the people that I've linked in with in all these conversations subsequently, we can provide pretty extensive data, and we've got a duty as manufacturers and distributors of components that provide that information to make sure that the information is presentable in a format that everybody can understand and utilise. But we're on a very early transitional stage of adoption with this data. And even, a classic thing, there's two types of mind of a specific device. Doesn't really matter about what it is, but there's localized data that needs somebody to go and get it from the unit. It retains the data for up to 10 years, but you need to go and get it if you want it, and it's a cheaper unit. Or you've got a unit that can deliver it over the cloud, and somebody can go into the cloud to access it through our portal, or we can API that to a third-party protocol that you can get the graphs and everything else, and people can see when it goes off. If you allow the contractor to buy it and you don't specify it correctly, which one will he buy?
Yeah.
He'll buy the cheaper one that you have to go and get the data from, because he doesn't give a monkeys about you getting the data. I would purport to you, sometimes they don't want you to get the data anyway, because at the end of practical completion, they don't want trouble.
So
they don't want
really
anything going wrong, because they don't want to be called back to the job. They want to just take the site cabins away and get off into the hill.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm maybe talking out. Yeah.
No, not at all. It's my fault for running over. Okay. Has anybody else got any comments, or should we wrap up? So we can pick up. I'm available if you want to pick up on this. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.